A helpless woman chained in the desert, a deadly gang ready to sell her, and a lone cowboy who rides in with the setting sun. When Ethan Cole draws his gun, fate shifts forever. Their escape sparks a journey of danger, trust, and destiny. Watch till the end, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let's get started. Clara's wrists burned, where the iron cuffs rubbed against her skin, each jolt of the wagon cutting deeper into her resolve. The drifters argued among themselves. Some wanted to move her to the mines, others wanted to leave her behind if she caused too much trouble. She stayed still, conserving energy. Every breath tasted like dust. Every gust of wind reminded her how far she was from home. She replayed memories of her father's ranch, the sound of horses at dawn, the smell of fresh coffee. Those memories kept her from breaking completely, even as fear hovered close. As the sun climbed higher, the heat grew merciless. The men tied their horses under a crooked mesquite tree, cursing the weather and blaming each other for the delay. Clara listened quietly, learning their weaknesses. One was drunk, one was impatient, one was too young to be cruel, but tried anyway. She focused on details, anything that might help her escape later, but deep inside, she felt the edges of hope curling inward, like paper singed by flame. She didn't know how much longer she could fight the despair closing around her. Then a strange stillness settled over the desert, a moment so sharp it sliced through the noise. The men noticed it too, and reached for their guns. Clara lifted her head, eyes stinging, and saw the silhouette of a lone rider approaching. He rode with steady confidence, not rushed, not afraid. His outline shimmered through the heat waves rising from the cracked ground. She didn't know him, but something about the way he carried himself, calm, deliberate, pulled her attention like a magnet. Her heartbeat slowed, almost steadied. The drifters began shouting, warnings mixed with insults, but the cowboy didn't react. He kept moving forward until he reached the edge of their makeshift camp. Then he reined in his horse, lowered his chin, and simply stared at them. Clara studied his face, weather lines stern and unreadable. His eyes were the color of deep river water, steady and certain. He wasn't here by accident. Men like him didn't wander into danger without reason. She felt her breath hitch, not in fear, but in something close to recognition. One of the drifters swaggered forward and raised his rifle, the barrel pointed too close to the cowboy's chest. "Turn around," he barked. "Ain't nothing here for you." The cowboy didn't budge. Instead, he shifted slightly in the saddle, resting a hand near his holster. Not a threat, just a warning. The message was clear. He'd draw fast if pushed. His silence unsettled the gang more than shouting ever could. Clara watched carefully. She didn't blink. It felt like watching a storm gather quietly before tearing the sky open. For the first time in hours, Clara found her voice. It came out weak, barely audible, but filled with every ounce of desperation she'd hidden inside. "Please," she whispered. Her throat ached with dryness, but her eyes stayed locked on the stranger. The cowboy's head tilted just slightly, acknowledging her plea. That tiny gesture sent a ripple of hope through her chest, warming places inside her she thought had gone numb forever. The drifters turned toward her angrily, but she held her gaze on the only person who felt like a lifeline. The cowboy finally dismounted, his boots hitting the ground with slow, firm certainty. The sound alone quieted the men. He stood tall, his shadow stretching across the dirt like a shield thrown over her. Clara felt an unexpected wave of relief wash through her, strange, powerful, almost overwhelming. The cowboy scanned the scene with the precision of someone who had survived ambushes, shootouts, and betrayals. His eyes flicked to her chains, then to each man surrounding her, calculating risks, timing, angles. He didn't rush. He didn't panic. He simply understood the situation and took control of it without saying a word. One of the drifters shouted, voice cracking with nerves, "She ain't your business." Another raised his pistol, hands trembling. Clara flinched, expecting violence to erupt instantly, but the cowboy moved with measured calm. "Let her go," he finally said, his tone low, unshakable. The men hesitated, confused by his confidence. Something about him unsettled them deeply. Clara realized this wasn't a reckless hero stumbling into trouble. This was a man who had stepped into danger countless times and walked out every time. His presence wasn't bravado. It was experience shaped into quiet authority. The standoff stretched into long, tense seconds. Clara felt sweat trickle down her back as the heat pressed harder, but all she saw was the cowboy. The desert wind picked up, swirling dust around their feet like a warning from the land itself. One wrong twitch, one nervous move, and gunfire would explode. A buzzard circled high overhead, sensing the tension, waiting for an outcome. Clara's hands clenched into fists, not from fear, but from a fierce, growing certainty that this stranger was her one chance, maybe her only chance, to survive the nightmare she'd been dragged into. As the cowboy shifted his stance, something changed in the air, an invisible shift, like the moment before thunder. Clara didn't understand it fully, but she felt it deep in her bones. The drifters felt it too. Their cocky expressions faltered, replaced by caution. The cowboy's gaze hardened, and in that instant Clara saw the truth. He was a man who had lost things, fought for things, and carried scars he never spoke of. Whatever brought him here, whatever path led him to her, it wasn't coincidence. It was fate aligning. Quietly in the desert dust, Clara's whisper trembled through the heat, soft but powerful enough to break the deadlock. "Help me." For days she had been silent, praying for rescue. Now the words escaped her like a promise handed to the wind. The cowboy's jaw tightened, and something fierce flashed in his eyes, a vow silently accepted. And in that fragile, breathless moment, Clara felt the world shift. The fear wasn't gone, but it loosened, replaced by the fragile spark of hope, catching flame. Whatever happened next, she knew one truth. Her fate had changed the moment he appeared on the horizon. Ethan Cole's eyes narrowed as he assessed the situation, his instincts sharpening like a blade honed by years of danger. The drifters swaggered with false confidence, unaware of the storm they had just provoked. Ethan had seen men like them in dusty towns, mining camps, border trails, men who thrived on fear and weakness. But today they had chosen the wrong county. He shifted his stance, boots grounding firmly in the sand. His voice remained steady and calm, not raised or threatened, but anchored with authority earned from a lifetime of facing gun barrels. "Walk away," he murmured, "while you still can." The men didn't listen. They rarely did. One laughed, flicking a glance at the others as if to confirm that the lone cowboy wasn't worth their concern. Another muttered something crude, tightening his grip on his rifle. Ethan didn't flinch. He had stood against entire outlaw groups in his days as a U.S. Marshal, had tracked fugitives through deserts, rivers, and snowfields. His experience was carved into every disciplined movement. The sinking sun painted the sky in gold and blood red, casting his shadow long across the camp. An omen the drifters should have heeded. A gust of wind stirred the dust, curling around Ethan's coat, as if the desert itself stood with him. He let the silence stretch a moment longer, giving the gang a final chance to reconsider. They didn't. The youngest of them, jittery and eager to prove himself, took a step forward, rifle aimed at Ethan's chest. That was the mistake. Ethan moved before the boy could even blink. His revolver flashed from its holster, a single shot exploding through the still air. The bullet buried itself in the dirt, inches from the boy's boots. A warning, not a kill. Panic erupted instantly. The drifters scattered like crows, startled by thunder. One dropped his gun and raised both hands in surrender. Another bolted for the rocks, scrambling like a frightened deer. Two froze, terror replacing their earlier arrogance. They finally recognized the name, Ethan Cole, the man who had put entire gangs behind bars and sent many more to the ground they now stood on. For years, stories about him drifted across saloons and campfires. Some exaggerated, some softened, but all carried the same truth. Ethan Cole wasn't a man you tested twice. Ethan didn't waste time pursuing the runner. There would be hours of daylight tomorrow to track him down, if needed. Right now, Clara mattered more. He holstered his revolver and strode toward her with purposeful calm. She sat slumped against the wagon, wrists bound by rusted chains that had carved angry red marks into her skin. Her breathing was shallow, her eyes unfocused, but when Ethan approached, something shifted in her expression, a fragile spark, flickering but alive. He knelt beside her and gently lifted her hands, examining the damage. The knife he carried glinted as he cut the shackles with swift, skilled movements. When the final chain fell away, Clara's body seemed to release at once, like a held breath finally let go. She swayed, her strength nearly gone, and Ethan caught her before she hit the ground. Her weight was light in his arms, but the exhaustion she carried was heavy. "You're safe now," he said softly, his voice losing its steel and finding a gentler tone. Clara closed her eyes, letting the words sink into the places inside her that had been scraped raw by fear. For the first time since her capture, she allowed herself to believe safety was possible. Her lips trembled as she spoke, voice thin as thread. "Take me with you, anywhere but here." The plea wasn't dramatic. It was honest, born from survival, not desperation. Ethan met her gaze steadily, understanding the depth behind the words. He didn't know her story yet, who she was, where she came from, what she'd endured, but he recognized the fear in her eyes. He had seen it before in others he'd saved. He nodded once, the kind of promise he never broke. Without speaking further, he lifted her gently in his arms, careful not to jostle her injured wrists. Ethan led her to his horse, a tall chestnut mare named Ember, known for her calm temperament and unshakable loyalty. Clara hesitated, overwhelmed, but Ethan steadied her with a reassuring hand. He positioned her carefully in the saddle, his movements protective yet respectful. When she finally settled, she let out a shaky breath, relief mingling with disbelief. Ethan tightened the reins, scanning the horizon to ensure no threat lingered. The desert was vast, but he knew its trails better than most. He mounted behind her, making sure she wouldn't fall. Ember shifted her weight, ready to move. As they rode away, the setting sun washed them in warm amber light. The wagon shrank behind them, the scattered drifters too frightened to follow. The sky blazed with hues of orange and purple, casting everything in a glow that felt almost unreal. Clara leaned back slightly, exhaustion overtaking her. But Ethan remained alert, eyes sweeping the landscape for danger. Every hoofbeat carried them farther from her nightmare, closer to whatever came next. The air smelled of sagebrush and cooling earth. The world softened.